Hello and welcome. This is Dawn. So today I've got another fun one for you featuring ink blending. Now this one's going to be a little bit longer, so grab your favorite beverage, maybe a snack, but I'm going to show you how to take some simple ink blending and take it to the next level. For this card, I'm going to be using the Honeybee Stamps Lovely Layers series. Now this series contains several florals that you die cut and build up to create these large realistic looking florals. I love this series. I have many of them and we're going to use a couple of them today. So this is their peony, and you can see here there are 7 layers to this peony. And I'm going to die cut them all from white paper because I'm going to be adding my color with ink blending. Now you could die cut this from several shades of a color. So if you wanted to do a pink peony, you could die cut it from several shades of pink and then layer it up, and that looks just as beautiful. But like I said, we're going to take it to the next level. We're going to step it up just a bit. For my blending, I'm going to be using the Rabbit Hole Designs Bitty Bunny Blender brush and the Tailored Expressions blending brushes. I'm going to be doing my ink blending for a lot of these on the My Sweet Petunia sticky mat. It'll just hold my die in place while I ink blend. And I'm going to be using Pure Color dye inks today. I like to have, for the flowers, I usually pick 2 to 3 shades. And for this, again, we're using the pinks. So I'm using Shell Pink, Little Piggy, and VI Pink. I will start with the base layer, and here you can see I'm taking the next layer, I'm laying it on top, and this will show me what will be revealed. And that's really the only part that I need to focus any detail on. Anything that happens under that will be covered by the top layer, so I don't have to worry about it. I will, however, be adding color to the entire die cut. I'm not going to worry about getting smooth blends or deep color or any of that stuff on the parts that won't show. I just want to make sure that if you look at it from the side, when I pop up some of the layers, there's not a stark white die cut showing underneath. I'm also going to work in very light layers. It's much better to build up your color than to go too heavy. Remember, we have 7 layers here, and you want to be able to distinctly see each layer as if it were a bunch of petals. So you want to create separation using your depth of color. And if you go too dark too fast, you're going to lose the ability to go lighter. It's much, much easier to add more than it is to take it away. In fact, it's almost impossible to take it away. You could always cut another die. So it's not the end of the world. But like I said, I like to start very light. So you can see I've gone just a hint of color, and now I'm just adding a little bit of darker color where the base of that peony would be. So where all of the petals would grow out of. If you imagined it as a bowl, it would be where all the petals meet at the bottom of the bowl. I'm going to concentrate darker color there and get much lighter as I go to the edges of the petal. I'll come back later and add detail into this, but for now, I just need that nice light hint of a color. I highly, highly recommend using blending brushes for this technique. It's much easier to control, and it's a lot easier to get that light layer of color using blending brushes. I also highly recommend this little detail blender from Rabbit Hole Designs, and I'll have everything linked in the description box below. But this is really going to save the day. This is what's going to make these florals sing. And you'll see what I mean here coming up. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next layer. And just like I did previously, I'm going to take the layer that's going to go on top of that. And I can see here, these are the only 2 spots that I'm really going to see. So that's the only part I have to make sure that I have good smooth blending on. Again, I'm going to go very light to start. And once I get all of my layers done, I'll come back in and add some deeper color here and there and add some striations and some shadows in each of the petals as well. Okay, so like I said, this is a long video, so I have put this into fast motion because we would be here for like 4 hours if I did not do that. So here I check my progress as I go, and then I move on to the next layer. So again, I check which petals will be showing, And again, that just gives me that mental map of what I need to concentrate on. Always concentrating heavier color in the center of the flower and then gradually fading it out to the tips of the petal. And here you can see as you start to layer them up, you can see how all of the petals are separate from each other. All right, so I have sped ahead to, I've got almost all of the layers covered with the first layer. Now this is the very top petal, and you can see you can stop. You could stop right here and it's beautiful. But this is where we step it up. All right, the blender brush, the Bitty Bunny blender brush, I believe. Here you can see I'm pointing out how I have it deeper at the bottom of the petal and very light at the tips. I'm going to zoom in very close for you so that we can see what's going on here. And I'm going to use this brush very lightly and very controlled. I haven't put a bunch of extra ink. I'm only using what is the residual ink left on the brush at this point. And I've turned the brush probably at a 35 to 45 degree angle so that I'm just using the very tip of the side of the brush to create something more like a straight line. I want that edge, so I have more control, and I'm putting down a thinner area of ink. I'm using the die, the shape of the die, where the petals have already been determined, their shape. So when it dips in, that would create a shadow. And I'm concentrating more color in those areas. Again, using the lines and the profile of the die itself as my guide. Stressing again that I'm not reloading a lot of color on my brush. This is one of those things that you get lost in. It's very therapeutic, very cathartic to just sit and slowly layer this color and watch the petals take shape. Now I just want to smooth out that bottom. That's why I grabbed that bigger brush. Made quick work of that. And again, just adding a little bit more in the center, and that will make this dip in the petal look deeper than the others. And there you can see how just that extra detail, when I lay it on top of the others here, you'll be able to see the difference. See what a difference that little bit of extra ink makes? Whew, so now it's time to do the rest of it. Now I like to work from the bottom up when I'm putting the first layer of ink, and then I work from the top down. Now here, I'm just pointing out that those two side petals are the only ones that are going to show. Those are the two I want to work on. So I'm going to go through and do the exact same thing to these other two petals, just adding extra color to create shadows and movement on each of the petals. This is really going to shape them and make them look very three-dimensional when they're actually flat. Just like I did before when I would lay the next die cut on top so I could see where I needed to concentrate my attention. I do the same thing here. And from here, it's really just a repeat of that same process. These petals are a lot of fun to do right here because they are scooping out at us. So they're going to be pretty light, but they're going to have a lot of movement to them too. So the die itself does have a lot of detail cut into the die, and you can just follow those lines. I like to add a little bit of extra color to the tips sometimes, and that will make it look like the petal is, the very edge of the petal is folded over. So here you can see it's coming together nicely. I just love doing these. And this is the second one I've done. I did another one using the tulips, And I'll show you at the end. I'll show you that card as well. With all of our layers complete, it's now time to assemble the flowers. So I'm using the Be Creative Precision Glue here. What I like to do is I like to glue the bottom portion of the flower with liquid adhesive. And I leave most of the top petals unglued. And that's so that I can come in and add a little foam adhesive wherever I want to. Now you could do it along the way as you go, like I'm doing right here. Or you could just glue all of it at the bottom and then come in afterwards and tuck your pieces in. I've done it both ways. So either way works just fine. But for brevity's sake, I'm showing you as I'm gluing it so that we don't have to watch gluing the second flower together. Now, if you are nervous, thinking, oh my goodness, all of those pieces, how am I going to know how to construct these flowers? Honeybee actually has a guide on their website when you buy them that you can download and print, and it shows you how to assemble all of the flowers. So you don't have to worry about guessing. Makes it a lot easier. So we'll go ahead and finish her up, and there she is. Isn't she beautiful? Oh, such a great design on these dies, all of them really. I'm having a blast with them. To finalize this peony, I'm just taking, and again, you don't have to do this. I'm just adding a little bit of extra color to create some depth and some cast shadows along the flower. So where that side petal is coming up, I'm just taking it darker around the petals underneath at the base. And then that just makes it look a little even more realistic. Okay, there is the leaves in the set as well. So I've cut 3 and I'm using Last Leaf to color that in. Just like before, I put down 1 layer and that's just to get that base color on there. Keep this one the lightest because it's going to be your highlight layer. And now it's time to come in and add the details. I'm going to use that same Bitty Bunny Blender brush. I cannot remember what this is called. Bitty Bunny Blender brush, I believe. It is a tongue twister. Like I mentioned, everything will be linked below in the description. So same as the petals, just adding a little bit of deeper color wherever the die is suggesting that it be. If the leaf is folded over, I'll make it darker underneath. If it seems to be waved or dipped, I'll just add a little extra color in the dipped or the waved areas. And then in some spots, I'll even add a little bit of ruffle on the edge of the leaf. Like you can see there, I made that little edge look a little bit ruffled. And again, that was using the die itself. The die shaped like that, and I just brought that darker color in at each spot that it dipped. So I'll just finish up the other 2 leaves, and then it will be time to work on our next flower. I'll show you just a little bit here again. You can see how I just hit those edges, create some movement in the leaves. And there we go. Okay, for the next flower, we're going to use the wildflowers, and we're going to use the bellflower here. I'm going to go ahead and cut that out again from white cardstock. And then we will start our ink blending. Using the Last Leaf. Did I use Last Leaf again? I think I used Appletini. I did try to mix up my greens and use a couple different shades, but it does look like I'm using Last Leaf. This is such a tiny stem here. I'm not really going to get a lot of detail into that stem, so Now the little bellflowers, on the other hand, they are small, but you can get a lot of detail in them. I'm putting down that base layer of cockleshell. And then again, I'm going to bring in that detail blender brush. And this is where we're going to really make these shine. For such a small flower, I was able to pack a bunch of detail into this. You can see that I've laid them over where they're going to go, where I'm going to glue them. And that's just to help me with a little direction on where the flower is going to be darker and lighter. So I'm concentrating on this one, I'm concentrating the color on the bottom of the flower. The way it will hang there, I'm making it darker on the bottom and letting the light just touch the top. You'll notice that I'm using the very edge of this brush. Putting it at a 30 to 40 degree angle really helps me just to use the edge of the brush. And a lot of the times I am actually coloring pretty much on the mat and just letting the very edges of the brush hit the die cut. And I'm able to really define 3 separate petals by adding that deeper color between each petal. So I hope I'm leaving in enough for you guys, but keeping it fast enough that it doesn't get boring or monotonous. I wanted to make sure to show you the entire process, but also not bore you to death. Because it is monotonous, it's the same steps over and over. Now this little bud here, there is a die in the set to cut out and put on top, but it was just easy enough for me to just add a little bit of purple at the end there and be done with it. Now one tip I can give you is if you're ink blending on your mat, make sure that you're cleaning in between because you don't want to pull the color that's left on the mat onto your new piece, especially if it's green and you were using pink. It's going to muddy it up. Okay, next up we're going to use the hydrangea. Now you can see this is a large cluster of flowers and I'm creating a bouquet. Now, you might think that you couldn't do a huge bouquet with these. Each individual image is pretty large, but with some minor adjustments, you can absolutely do that. Now, there are 6 layers to this one. I don't need it to be quite that large, so I'm only going to use 3. I'm going to be putting this on a slimline card and I'm going to trim off anything that hangs over the edges anyway. So why do all of that work if I'm just going to trim it away when I can easily use just a couple layers from this and get just enough. So these are the 3 layers that I'm going to use. Again, I'm die cutting them all from white. I'm using my Spellbinder Platinum 6. And I like to tape my dies in place just to keep them from shifting around when I'm die cutting. And I love the detail that these dies cut into the cardstock as well. It's not just flat, there's actual detail that gets die cut into these dies. All right, for the hydrangea, I did do a purpley blue hydrangea for another card. This time I wanted to do something a little bit different. These are the types of hydrangeas that I grow in my yard. And so those are my inspiration. I'm doing the Blushing Bride hydrangeas. So they're white or a very light lime green. Sometimes they're a little bit darker lime green. And as they bloom, they'll start off like a limey green, they'll turn white, then they start to turn rose colored, so the edges will get pink, and then the whole thing will turn like this deep, deep autumn rose color, and then they dry up. So they're beautiful. They're bloom for a very long time here, and so over the months, I have these gorgeous hydrangeas that then change color every month. So it's like having 3 or 4 different varieties of flower with only the one bush. They're just absolutely beautiful. So I started off by adding a little last leaf to the very center. Softly let that kind of blend out towards the edges. And then I'm just hitting the very edges with a little bit of no, Sweet Nectar. Little Piggy. Little Piggy. I'm trying to remember which one I used. And I'm going to do the same thing for each layer. I'm not being overly detailed again on the layer that will not be showing. I'm only concentrating on the layers which will be revealed underneath the top layers. And you saw me there, I stuck my pink brush in the green ink. That was not good. Luckily, it was on one of the hydrangeas that will be covered, so no harm, no foul. Now it's time to assemble this. And I'm going to put glue on the centers of, well, I glued all of the underneath hydrangea. Now for the ones that are, this is the top level of this hydrangea, I'm only putting glue in the center. I'm leaving the petals free so that I can slip some foam adhesive under there selectively. So here I'm using, I think this is 16th inch foam, and I'm going to tuck that up underneath the petals. And then for the top one, I believe I used 1/4 inch foam squares. And again, you don't necessarily need to add any of this foam tape. I just love the way it looks. They already have a ton of dimension, but you know, I got to do what I got to do. Okay, so now it's time to create our card. I'm going to use press and seal. I've arranged this how I want it to sit, and now I'm going to use press and seal to pick it up so that I can move it over to my white base. Now I left this in because it does look gorgeous on a dark base. But because I was making it as a sister card to a card I already made, I went ahead and put it on white. And what I'm doing is I'm using my bone folder to burnish the press and seal to the areas of the die cuts that I want to make sure it's really adhered. I don't want to lose any of those die cuts because I don't want to have to arrange it again. So now I can just pick it up and move it to where I want it. Another great advantage to using the press and seal is because you can see through it. You can kind of play around with where you want to place your final arrangement. I'm going to tape my card shut here. And now I'm just going to show you a couple little ways. Because I have it on this press and seal, I can really fine tune the positioning of my floral arrangement. And I'll be cutting off the edges, so I want to pay attention to how much of each thing I'd be cutting off. Now I've decided where I want it, and I'm burnishing the edge of the press and seal to my table. Then I'm going to take a piece of washi tape and I'm going to tape my card to the table. Now, what this does is it creates a hinge method for me to glue this down. This isn't as important, the hinge method, for this particular card. I ended up using mostly all liquid adhesive and then just tucked my foam adhesive around the edges. But I kept it in here to show you how you could glue down each layer one at a time. So if I wanted to pop up the next layer, I could add foam adhesive, lay my sheet down, and then pull it up, and it would release everything that I had glued down. So this is just the easiest, no-fail way to glue down your floral arrangements. Here you can see I just decided, I'm just going to liquid adhesive it all. And I'm only keeping it toward the base of each element, and I'm leaving the edges without any glue. And then I'll come back afterwards and add some foam adhesive. Because each of these die cuts already has so much dimension, I really did not need to pop them off of the base as well. And here's where you can see I'm going to grab some of that foam adhesive and I'm going to start tucking it under areas just to pop them away from the panel at the edges instead of popping the whole thing up. Like I said, there is a lot of dimension on this card, so putting it underneath the whole thing and popping it off the base wasn't necessary. Put a little bit under some of the leaves. Just pop those up. And then when I'm done, I'm just going to trim off the excess that's hanging. Now you want to go careful and slow with this, especially if you're cutting off multiple layers or any layers that have foam adhesive in them, because it's easy to miscut if that's the case. Ask me how I know. So I kind of take my time and look from the back and the front while I'm cutting. All right, so that is going to finish up these cards. Now for these sentiments, I use the Miss You Big Time and Thinking of You Big Time stamps and dies, also from Honeybee, and finished those off with those big bold sentiments. I love the way these turned out. I added some gems from Rabbit Hole Designs to the centers of the hydrangeas. And here's the one with the tulips that I mentioned. Now this one does not have as much detail. So if the detail part isn't your thing, here it's pretty much just flat ink blended. And it still is just as gorgeous. But again, I wanted to share how you could bump it up just a bit and add a ton of dimension with just ink. Whew, I warned you it was going to be a long one. Hopefully it was not too long. And hopefully I've inspired you. If you decide to give this a try, make sure you tag me on social media. I would love to see what you've done. Don't forget, all of the supplies that I used will be listed in the description box below. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.